You've got questions, we've got answers.
And I think that makes your pathway to university a lot easier.
The brain,
especially the first year if you pick the right subjects in year 11 and 12.
Information.
Here, and those signals run down through the spine.
Here in our studio, we'll be bringing you the answer to these questions and more. Join us for Informate. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the program. Today we will be talking about road and driving safety. Annually, the economic cost of road accidents in Australia is estimated at around $27 billion, not to mention all the social impacts associated with those accidents. Since record keeping began in 1925, over 180,000 deaths have occurred on Australian roads. This has declined substantially in the last 4 decades, despite considerable population growth and a 3-fold increase in motor vehicle registration. During this period, the deaths per year have fallen from over 3,700 in 1970 to 1,310 in 2012. The age group at the highest risk of fatal accidents is 17 to 25-year-olds. Now they account for about 13% of the population, but 22% of all the fatalities on the road. We are joined here today by Bilal, industry expert with supercars and high-performance vehicles, and Faisal, a safe driving instructor. Now, gentlemen, the safe driving techniques, it's quite a large umbrella. Now, to specify that, stuff like pre-start checks, let's start where you begin. Now, when you hop into a car, Bilal, what are some of the pre-start checks that you would do?
Yeah, some of the things are, your first thing is driving position, so you'd get comfortable in the seat position with the arm length or the distance you are from the steering wheel. Your wrist, this part of your wrist should be just over the steering wheel with your arm slightly bent. Your backrest should be at 90 degrees and then tilted slightly back just a fraction from there. So that's a good sort of sitting position with the height where you can see just over the nose of the car. Once you've got that, you've got your mirror checks. So the rear vision mirror should be able to see both top and bottom pillar straight through, so you're not cutting anything off. With the side mirrors, on the right, on the driver's side, you should be able to see just a portion or the rear portion of the vehicle, and with the passenger side mirror, you should only be able to see the lane or the side of the car without seeing any of the car whatsoever. So there's some of the pre-checks you'll do. Other things are checking your gauges, fuel, water, oil, those sorts of things. And you can start from there.
Okay, now with the blind spots when you do your mirror adjusting, Faisal, what is a blind spot?
A blind spot's somewhere where if looking forward in the vehicle's cabin, okay, you're not going to be able to see if using it when you use your mirrors. Okay, so you physically have to turn your head in order to check your blind spot. Okay. There are also certain catchphrases you can use because there's a lot to take on board. Obviously, you get in a car. Okay, what do I have to do? There's some catchphrases you can use. So some of the catchphrases I've heard before are LAMS, which means get in the car, lock the door, because we are talking about safe driving after all, and it's a good practice to lock the door. Adjust your cockpit, as Bilal already covered. Mirrors, which has already been covered, and then finally. Check your shoulder, check your blind spots, and then obviously you move off. And another one I've heard bandied around before is MISM, which is you get in your car, adjust your mirrors, indicate shoulder, and then eventually you'll end up moving off.
Now, once your car's moving, you're on the road, you're moving ahead. Now, what are some of the things you should be looking out for when you're on the road?
One of the main things is, and just to finish off on blind spots, is your A pillar and your B pillar. So if I explain that, the A pillar is the corner between the windscreen and your front window, and the B pillar is the pillar between the 2 side windows. So there's some things you'll need to look around when stopped to turn, when turning, and those sorts of things. When moving, some of the other main things to look out for is your distance between yourself and other cars. So in front of you, one must always maintain a 3-second rule, or a 3-second bubble around your car, also known as. And basically a good way of measuring that is to, as the car in front of you drives past the telegraph pole, count 3 seconds, and then that's when your car should pass, and no sooner than that. So obviously that would adjust with speed. The faster you're going, the bigger that gap, in distance and so on and so forth.
Okay. Let's head across to Johnny Greaves, our safe driving coach and ex-racing driver, who's going to take us through some safe driving methods.
To demonstrate a 3-point turn indication, pulling into the curb. Again, staying at least a metre away. See the curb in the rear wheel before you go in too close with the front. Indicator on, checking for motor vehicles and pedestrians and everything else that happens in the city. So mirror, mirror, shoulder, 3-point turn, checking both angles. As you run out of road, give yourself plenty of room, parallel your wheels, select reverse, mirror, mirror, mirror. Again, looking over your shoulder, measuring your distance with the car, paralleling your wheels, come to a stop. Selecting first, look left and right, indicator on to the right, and we move off again.
Now say you're driving in the sunset, you're driving into the sun. There's a lot of glare, your vision's quite blurred. Now Faisal, can you tell me a bit of some tips you can tell drivers to avoid that sort of glare?
Yeah, certainly. In terms of avoiding glare, I think it's the common sense solutions, sunglasses, using your sun visors and things that are in the car already. But just following on from what was said before, if you are finding that the conditions are such that you're finding it difficult to drive, right, well, you might want to start by increasing the gap between yourself and the vehicle in front, all right, because obviously when there's too much glare, you can't see properly, okay, it's going to affect your reaction, your ability to react. Other things that'll have an effect on that are the weather, okay, so if it's raining, if the roads are wet, you may want to increase that 3-second gap a little bit more because wet roads will reduce your braking distances, and also there's a possibility that if you do, although cars nowadays have ABS, which reduces the amount of forward skidding, there is also still a possibility that the car will continue to move once you've put your foot on the brake. So, the different conditions will obviously affect how you drive and your reaction times and things like that.
Okay.
We're simulating basically an emergency stop and the braking distance and the actual reaction time or preparation time before our foot's got hard on the brake. So what we've got here, the first yellow marker is 14 metres back. So we're working on a typical road car, say something like a nice Golf, new Golf, a Volkswagen Golf or a Sirocco. And test, what they've done is they've gone at 14 metres with the full ABS activated from 60 k's to a zero, to a stop. Now that's with good tyres, new tyres, new brakes, and a professional driver at the wheel on a good tar seal surface in the dry. So I'm just going to walk out there. 14, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So here's our 14 metres. Okay, so looking back at the car there, that's how far the car will travel with the ABS activated. Now, looking back up the road here, we've got to put in the actual reaction time because we're not always prepared for everything, and there's a processing element. And this is 14 metres travelling if we're travelling at 60 k's an hour. So now I'm going to actually go out distance. We'll travel around about 17 metres in 1 second at 60 k's an hour. It's maybe sort of 16.6 to 17 metres. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So for our foot to get on the brake, we have to have seen the event here, whether it's a kid on a bike, a cyclist, a motorbike, someone running an intersection, a pedestrian walking out in front of us, a car suddenly braking, something falling off the back of a truck. We have to have seen it here. We will have travelled to where the next yellow marker is before our foot's even got on a brake in 1 second. Okay, your average motorist reaction time is meant to be more like 1.5 seconds. Okay, so this is the best case scenario. Then the car will travel from that yellow marker to where it's parked, where the Lamborghini convertible's parked there, to a complete stop from 60 k's an hour to zero. Preparation time, processing time, and hard on the brakes at the yellow marker, then ABS activated. Now, if we were to work on more on the 1.5 second gap, we actually have to go all the way back to here, working on a 25 metre preparation time before the foot's hard on the brake, rather than the 17 metres. 17 metres is probably best case scenario for most motorists, most average motorists, whereas your typical motorist will be actually back to here. So we're 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So this is more in line with what the RTA guideline would be, where we'd go from here to the yellow marker before our foot's on the brake, the foot's hard on the brake, and the car comes to a stop there.
Right now, Faisal, with the ABS, what is ABS braking?
ABS stands for anti-locking braking system. Essentially, the technology behind, or the concept behind it is, if you, in older cars, if you planted your foot on the brake, the wheels would lock up. Okay, now the wheels locking up doesn't ensure that your vehicle's actually going to stop. What happens is the forward momentum continues the vehicle being propelled forward. The problem with that is that you lose all control because the wheels are locked up and you aren't able to control the vehicle either left or right. So what the engineers came up with was this anti-lock braking system. And essentially what that does is it prevents your wheels from constantly locking up. What happens is they'll lock, then they'll roll, they'll lock, then they'll roll, they'll lock, then they'll roll. And that continues until you stop. Now, the purpose behind the forward rolling of the wheels is that it provides you the ability to control the vehicle left or right, okay, because the wheels are still rolling. And you only ever have control of a vehicle when the wheels are in motion. If the wheels are stopped and they're stationary, as happens when you lock your brakes, you lose all control of the vehicle. So that's the idea behind ABS.
So now, Bilal, if the wheels lock up and you're travelling forward at a skid, are your tyres working as effectively?
Not at all. Yeah, there's no action between the friction of the tyres with the road surface. And again, you know, we touched on wet surfaces earlier. Wet surfaces is the same sort of thing. It reduces the amount of friction, and friction is what allows the car, you know, to stop.
Now, Faisal, if your car is out of control or you've started slipping, what are some of the things you should do? Should you slam straight on the brakes?
Well, I think just before we talk about how to control your car, should you find yourself in a hairy situation, there's maybe a few more things which you need to consider in terms of car control.
Yeah, go on.
You need to have a working knowledge of your vehicle. Okay, is it a front wheel drive? Is it a rear wheel drive? Is it an all wheel drive? Because rear wheel drives and front wheel drives will behave differently in a skid situation, and there's a different way to control it depending on whether the vehicle is driven by the front wheels or the back wheels. So I think that's an essential factor in being able to control your car correctly. When you talk about car control, you know, it pretty much boils down to being switched on. Okay, we hear this term used much, being switched on. What exactly is it? Well, it's being aware. Okay, just be aware of your surroundings. Constantly scan in front of you, know what's coming up. If there's a wet patch in the road or if there looks like there's a hole in the road, slow down. Okay, because there is no better way of controlling a car than avoiding hazards in the first place, okay, or preparing yourself for them. So constantly scan your surroundings from time to time, look in your mirrors, know what's happening around you. If you scan, you'll find that you'll pick up speed signs easier, you know, and that helps us avoid the authorities, which no one really, you know, likes to get a ticket for speed. So the main thing there is just be aware of what's happening around you, and that will help with car control. Now, should you find yourself in a situation where you've lost control of the car, the first thing and the most important thing is not to panic. Don't panic. Try and be calm. Now, to be calm comes with knowledge. Okay, if you have knowledge of how to correct your mistake and how to fix a certain problem, well, then you'll do it. You'll do it because that's what you know.
So should you slam on the brakes or press the brakes if you find your car coming out from, say, the back?
Well,
because that's a natural reaction. You first, obviously, start losing your car, you'll slam on the brakes.
Absolutely. What you've got to be aware of, even in cars with ABS that we mentioned before, is the best way to stop a car is to feather the brakes. Okay? If you plant the brakes on, yes, ABS will help, but there's no better way than to control your braking. Instead of just
feathering. What's
feathering the brakes means a nice, controlled, easy enough the brakes. Okay, know where the braking threshold is, so where the ABS threshold is. In other words, at which point is your ABS going to kick in? Okay, when your pedal gets to a certain degree, when the ABS is going to kick in, and that comes with intimate knowledge of the vehicle, which is what I was saying before.
Yep.
And to avoid planting your foot on the brake, just feather the brake, understand your car, understand how it behaves.
Okay. So now you mentioned the different types of drive options available. Now, Bilal, would you care to explain what a rear-wheel drive car would be? Yeah,
a rear-wheel drive car essentially is where, in a conventional car, the engine is at the front. So a rear wheel car is where the drivetrain goes under the entire car and the back wheels propel the car. The front wheels still steer, but the back wheels propel the car. And with that, a lot of times when losing control of the vehicle, the car can do what's known as oversteer. So the rear end of the car comes out further than it actually is supposed to. And in front wheel drive cars, like Faisal mentioned, the car can understeer. So the front end of the car moves in the opposite direction. Now, one of the best ways to counterbalance that when one's lost control is once the vehicle is in the position that you want it to, make sure the steering wheel is straight and the car will automatically correct once it sways a little bit from side to side.
So now front wheel drive, I mean, it's common sense, so I'm guessing the engine's at the front and the front wheels are also driven?
That's right, yeah, and it's very difficult, or much more difficult I should say, to lose control in that type of vehicle because the back doesn't have that swinging effect like a rear wheel drive car will.
Alright, now if your drive's going to your front wheels, does that affect your steering, or if the wheels are doing the steering and the driving?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, these cars are generally less powered, so they're not high-powered vehicles because the front wheels are doing everything. They're braking, they're steering, they're driving, they're doing all those sorts of things. And the other thing with that is, yes, you can have difficulty steering the car and turning it when the car, you're overpowering it too much. Okay. And that's because that same wheel component or that same system is doing everything at the same time.
Okay, now Faisal...
Just on that, also with your front wheel cars, if we think about basic physics, we're not going to get into it, the nuts and bolts of it, but just basic physics, when you accelerate, what happens is the weight of the car shifts rearward. Okay, so the back comes down and the front comes up.
Yep.
Okay, now in a rear-wheel drive car, that's fine. You'll maintain control and the rear wheels will maintain contact with the road and propel you forward. Okay, if you harshly accelerate in a front-wheel drive car, what happens is the weight comes off the front, as I said, and the car goes down from the back. Consequently, the weight coming off the front reduces your control because the wheel there's not as much weight on the wheels on the road in front, and the wheels can go into a spin. Okay, so it's just basic knowledge.
So now all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive cars, Faisal, can you tell us a bit about what those are?
Yeah, four-wheel drive cars. Basically, they allow you to have a better control of the vehicle. Okay, all four wheels of the vehicle are working at the same time and moving the vehicle forward. That's the difference between the two-wheel drive and the four-wheel drive car.
Now, is there advantages of having four-wheel rather than two-wheel drives?
Yeah, definitely. With the a lot of high-powered vehicles will have four-wheel drive, and that provides more traction. So essentially, all four wheels are gaining traction at the same time, and that can propel a car at a high acceleration.
Okay, so
in four-wheel driving situations, so an off-road vehicle or an SUV, then again it's different. You know, if one wheel, say, is not touching the ground, then the other three can compensate for that and provide you with more traction as well.
Okay, Faisal, regular servicing in your car, is that an important issue if you're going to be looking at it from a vehicle perspective?
Yeah. Regular servicing is obviously very important. Number one, because your car will continue to run. If you don't have it serviced regularly, if you don't service it yourself regularly, your vehicle's going to fail on you. Okay. It is also very important from a safety point of view. For example, the tyres. If your tyres are bald, well, you're going to lose control. You're going to reduce the amount of control you have in that vehicle, aren't you? So that all comes under the regular servicing of the vehicle. If there isn't enough brake fluid in the vehicle, well, there is a chance that the brakes are going to fail. Obviously, we all know that can lead to disaster. So I think servicing is a very important facet of safe driving in general. Now, in terms of servicing, the things that we normally look at, your oils, your waters, coolant, and further splitting the oils, we're looking at gearbox oil, we're looking at power steering oil, transmission oil, engine oil, and we've got our brake fluids, clutch fluids in a manual vehicle. Okay. Normally the best way to service, there's actually, well, I suppose I could use the word science for it, for want of a better term. There's a science to it. You open the bonnet of the vehicle and you'll notice from left to right, all the things that need to be checked in modern vehicles are normally highlighted in a particular colour.
Well, say if you're getting started in driving in Australia, 16 years old, you get your learner's licence, what sort of experiences should you think learners should be getting while they're on the road?
Yeah, in Australia we have a number of hours that needs to be done through a logbook of assisted driving, so a learner driver in the driver's seat, obviously with a fully licensed driver as a passenger. So there's that. there's a number of performance driving instructing sort of advanced courses that people can do as well, and I think they're very beneficial, especially, you know, we all remember when we were young and you're just getting, you know, in the car and you've just got your license and you might be a little bit, you know, overexcited. I think it's always important to really understand the car, what it can do, and sort of the pitfalls of how dangerous it can be if that vehicle was to go out of control, which is something that obviously comes with experience. At that age, you don't have that experience, so I think it's a necessary part of learning how to drive.
Okay. Now you mentioned remaining alert. Now what sort of effects does fatigue have on your alertness when you're in the car?
Well, fatigue would greatly reduce your reaction time or your ability to react. Okay, so if you're tired, reaction time slows. And if reaction time slows, your ability to avoid a particular obstacle also slows. Okay, so obviously if you're tired, you need to be aware and maybe slow down. Okay, not drive so fast, maybe even under the speed limit, so that the reduction in speed may sort of counterbalance that fatigue effect.
Okay. So now there is a saying in Australia, every 2 hours stop, revive, survive. Bilal, can you tell us the importance of stopping?
Yeah, so I mean, if you are that fatigued, you know, and this is even sooner than 2 hours, and if you're that fatigued, it always is a good idea to pull over, you know, have a sleep, you know, once you pull over in a safe environment, and then continue driving from there, and that can just re-energize the body, the mind, and the reaction time as well. But definitely long distances, like any activity, it can make you quite drowsy, and especially such a sedentary activity, you know, as driving can be. And usually if you're going for a long drive, it's 2 hours or more, it will be on a highway or a freeway. And that can be quite, you know, boring. So definitely your reaction time will slow down, you will become drowsy. It's always good to have a break, have a drink of water, get out of the car and have a bit of a stretch, and then get back in the car and continue your journey from there.
So now say, Faisal, you're alert in your car, you're driving along. Are there distractions available inside your cockpit, in your car, something like your stereo or your mobile or something?
Well, I think you just touched upon the two biggest ones. Certainly mobile phone in today's day and age is the biggest distraction. In fact, around the world, there are laws put into place which prevent people from using their or having their mobile phone in their hand even. For example, in Australia, New South Wales, you're not even allowed to, whilst you're driving, not even allowed to have your mobile phone in your hand. It doesn't matter whether you're using a GPS or, you know, your text messaging, which for which you'd obviously have to take your eyes off the road and look at your phone. A split second with your eyes off the road can have disastrous effects.
Okay. So
and with the radio, you should definitely, you know, only really use that radio, air conditioning, all these sorts of things, even readjusting the mirrors. You should only really do those once the car is at a stop. So whether you've stopped at the traffic lights or whether you've stopped in traffic, they're the times that you should really, you know, use those devices.
Okay. Now, gentlemen, I think we've thoroughly covered the topic of safe driving. Is there any thoughts you might like to add to our viewers? Any other things that you think we've missed today?
I think just on steering itself, driving is a science. Okay, driving can be labelled a science. There are many teachings which will allow you to drive safely. Okay, at the end of the day, it all boils down to lack of complacency. Okay, and your skills and ability as a driver. I think we all get complacent on the roads. I don't think there is a driver on the road that doesn't get complacent. Okay, but complacency can be a driver's biggest enemy because it becomes routine. We do it every day. Okay, and for 20 years we may not have an accident, but the one time, you know, that we're not concentrating or fatigued or tired or whatever, you know, that may end up in a disaster. But your control of the steering is one of the factors that will allow you to drive safely. Okay, you'll see many people around, one hand on the steering wheel on the top or on the bottom or whatever. That reduces your ability to control the vehicle. So what you can do is you place your hands on the steering wheel at the 2 o'clock position for your right hand and the 10 o'clock position for your left hand. Okay, thumbs are outside the steering wheel, and that is basically where we have our hands when we're driving. Now, when we're turning the steering wheel, obviously we're not going to be turning like this because we're going to be twisting our arms. You're not going to get that much control of the vehicle. So what has been designed is a method called what's commonly known as push-pull steering, or more recently starting to be called pull-push steering, which is actually what it is. So basically, what happens is one hand, if you're turning to the left, for example, okay, one hand will push the steering. Okay, my right hand will push the steering across to the left, and at the same time, my left hand will pull the steering down. Okay, and when your hands get to roughly this position, then you can continue to move them. Okay, and it ends up back at the 10 and 2, and then you just keep doing the same thing again, depending on whether it's a right turn or a sweeping right bend, and obviously the angle of the bend. Okay, so push-pull steering is another method which will assist your control of the vehicle.
Okay. Now, Faisal, can you tell me, apart from safe driving, is there any other way to reduce the road tolls in Australia?
You mentioned in your introduction about the reduction in road trauma across Australia and New South Wales. I think that safe driving is not the only contributing factor towards a reduction of road trauma. There are a number of other things. For example, the advancements in modern technology with vehicles. Prior to the 70s, we didn't have such thing as crumple zones, which are in actuality a safer way. When the vehicle collides with something, they make it a lot safer. Okay, there weren't airbags around. Today we have airbags. ABS, we mentioned that before. We didn't have ABS before. Today we have ABS. Education has definitely improved. The advertising campaigns are a lot more aggressive for safe driving, and the roads authorities around Australia and indeed around the world are becoming more aware of what's happening, and they're able to address the issues. Signage is becoming a lot more prominent, and I don't just mean speed signs. There are many signs, for example, here in Australia, there are many signs on the side of the road, stop, revive, survive. And they come up constantly on the road, so people, this is a bit of a reminder. Also, and this may not make everybody entirely happy, but speed cameras. Speed cameras would no doubt have, would contribute to the reduction in road trauma. Be it either mobile or stationary, and in New South Wales and across Australia we find that there are many stationary cameras around and people do slow down for them. The increase in the number of law enforcement, police on the streets, so these are all things that contribute to the reduction in road trauma.
Thanks for joining us on the show today, gentlemen. Thanks for watching. We look forward to bringing you another production from MTA International Australia Studios. Jazakumullah.